Welcome, guys. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about a scenario that I want to create based off the British Airborne, primarily those that were at Arnhem Bridge in the first few days, taking on the SS Reconnaissance Regiment's attack across the bridge. So what's the objective of today's video? Today's main objective is to create a 50-point list to defend against the German offensive operations against Arnhem Bridge. So we're going to be pretending that we're Lt.Col John Frost. We've got some units at the bridge. We're going to create a 50-point list to defend the bridge against the light reconnaissance regiment attack. So what do we know of the units that arrived at the bridge? We know the 2nd Parachute Battalion with its HQ, Alpha and Bravo Company made it to the bridge with support. With those, the 1st Parachute Brigade, HQ, 1st Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers, 3rd Parachute Battalion, the 1st Air Landing Anti-Tank Battery with B Troop and 1 gun from C Troop, and then other units that arrived, just small little units, small detachment, the 1st Airborne Reconnaissance Regiment, and then a handful of gliders. So I'm going to try and show all of this using the Forces of War, Flames of War builder, and hopefully create something that you guys will agree with, and hopefully it'll be a little bit of fun as well. Okay, so let's pretend that it's the 18th of September 1944. We can hear that there's some German vehicles on the other end of Arnhem Bridge. We're playing Lt.Col John Frost, who's the company commander of the 2nd Parachute Battalion. We've got our troops situated in various buildings around the bridge at Arnhem, and we are responsible for trying to hold it for as long as we can. So we want to create a 50-point list to sort of reenact that if we can. So if you've watched my previous video, you'll know sort of how to use Forces of War, the Flames of War force builder. So for this force, we're going to be using the Bulge British book. We're going to click Bulge British. Now there's only 2 applicable airborne companies that you can make here. It's the Frost Parachute Company is the first one, and the Glider Pilot Squadron is the second one. We're going to be focusing on Frost Parachute Company, obviously. So we have to pick a HQ and 2 infantry platoons or a Parachute Royal Engineer troop. So we're going to go ahead and click the company HQ. So this is us. This is who we're going to be portraying. So let's pretend that this is Lt.Col John Frost and his 2IC. So we're going to click that one. He's going to have his Sten gun. It's going to be a rate of fire of 3, halted and moving with a range of 4 inches. Okay, so it's just a little SMG, good for obviously defending the buildings that we're in, but you really don't want to be facing anything, especially as the company HQ. Okay, so next we have to pick a parachute platoon. Lt.Col John Frost arrived at Arnhem Bridge with the majority of his battalion. So he was the company commander of the 2nd Parachute Battalion. He arrived with his HQ, A Company, B Company, and support, which consisted of about 340 men. So we know that there was a lot of his company that were at Arnhem Bridge. So with that in mind, I think it's safe to say that we can use a full strength card here with an additional PAT. I don't think that's unrealistic. I think that's quite fair. We've got 2 PATs then that can hopefully deal some damage to the recce vehicles, the German recce vehicles that are going to be crossing. We've also got Bren and rifle teams mixed in there, so it's a rate of fire of 2 halted. We really don't want to be moving. We're going to be in cover in the buildings and around the bridge, so the rate of fire 2 is going to be extremely handy, and an anti-tank of 2, firepower of 6. So these are light vehicles that are coming across, so they might actually come in handy. Obviously the PI is anti-tank 10 and a firepower of 5+. That should hopefully come in handy too. So that's taken us to 13 points. We've only got 50 points to play with here. So this is where it's going to start getting interesting. Next, we have to pick either a parachute platoon or a Royal Engineer troop. Now, for the sake of this scenario, I'm going to pick a parachute Royal Engineer troop. The 1st Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers, they made it to Arnhem Bridge, or the majority of them did. They consisted of the HQ, Alpha troop, and most of Bravo troop. But that's interesting, most of Bravo troop. So I'm going to actually go ahead and pick 4 Bren and 1 PA. I want want to portray these as Bravo Troop of that 1st Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to sort of emphasize the fact that not all of the majority of the units at Arnhem weren't at full strength, but I want to show that these were depleted a little bit more than some of the other ones that are around there. We also going to include an additional PIA in that one though. So then that takes us to 21 points. We know that the 2nd Parachute Battalion had obviously a lot of infantry there, but I don't want to add any more infantry for the time being. What I want to focus on now is some of the support options that we're going to put in within the company. So that's machine guns, mortars, anti-tank, etc. So 2nd Parachute Battalion had support. Part of that support would have been Vickers machine guns. So I'm going to go full strength Vickers machine gun platoon to represent that. Within that, we've got the rate of fire of 6. So that's going to be brilliant for putting down fire on the bridge and hopefully pinning down any infantry that come along with that, and just your typical anti-tank and firepower rating for that. The interesting thing with this is they can also fire an artillery bombardment as well. Just sort of shoot their Vickers up in the air and hope that it rains bullets down on the infantry, but I think for the sake of this scenario, we're just going to be using them in the traditional manner. Okay, next we're going to use the 3-inch mortars of the 2nd Parachute Battalion. So we can pick 3 for 6 points. Pretty expensive, but they're going to come in really crucial for defending the bridge. So anti-tank of 1, but firepower of 4+, with range of 40. So the range isn't going to be too much of a concern, but the firepower is going to be what we're interested in there. 4+ is not too bad for a mortar. Okay, so from my own research, I know that the 1st Airborne Division as a whole relied heavily on artillery. So not just Lt.Col's artillery towards the back end of the operation, also the airborne 75mm light artillery that accompanied the 1st Airborne Division. They were extremely handy with dealing with German attacks and being able to sort of counteract their offensive operations around the bridge. So another key thing about these is that the artillery observers that were at the bridge actually had the bridge ranged in prior to any engagements with the German recce company that crossed it, to the point where they knew that they were going to hit their mark. They had them ranged in. So with that in mind, I definitely feel like we need to have some in here. The problem is we've only got 50 points to deal with, so I'm only going to pick 2. With the scenario that I'm planning, it's only going to be a small game, so these are going to be off table, but it's good to show that they are part of the formation. So I'm going to pick 2 here. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to add an anti-tank section. So accompanying John Frost and his 2nd Parachute Battalion and the rest that were accompanying the 2nd Parachute Battalion, we know that the 1st Air Landing Anti-Tank Battery also accompanied John Frost. B Troop arrived in full strength and C Troop had 1 gun. With that in mind, you would have thought that 4 guns would have been an option in this, but they're not. So we're going to go ahead and pick 2. We couldn't have picked 4 anyway, but for 6 points, we'll pick 2 6-pounders. And these are going to be obviously an essential piece of equipment to deal with those vehicles crossing the bridge. Okay, so we've got 44 points here. Let's have a quick look before we go and look at command cards. So we've got Frost's Parachute Company HQ. We've got Frost Parachute Platoon. So that's going to be acting as the 2nd Parachute Battalion. We've also got the Parachute Royal Engineer Troop. So that's going to be acting as the 1st Parachute Squadron Royal Engineers. Then we've got the Airborne Vickers and the 3-inch mortars. So they're going to be part of the 2nd Parachute Battalion. We've got the 1st Air Landing Anti-Tank Battery, and then we've got some of the airborne 75mm light howitzers. I want to add some command cards to these purely because I feel like it's necessary. So we're going to return back and we're going to have a look at some of the Bulge airborne command cards. So you can see we can take the Airborne Recce Squadron. Unfortunately, the Airborne Recce Squadron's initial objective was to race ahead to the bridge, but they were blocked and also suffered delays. So they never actually made it to the bridge, apart from a couple of Jeeps and their company commander who made it to the bridge. The rest of them unfortunately didn't. So that plan was, well, initially had failed. And then we've got the Airborne Royal Engineers. We've included an engineer section, so we're not going to be worried about that. But what I do want to look at is a couple of things. So firstly, flamethrowers. We can take flamethrowers with a Parachute Royal Engineer troop, but they're limited. So you only get the one card, but we get to take 2 flamethrower teams with the following rating. So rate of fire of 2, moving or halted with a range of 4 inches, firepower is auto. So if you guys have watched A Bridge Too Far, you'd know that 2 sappers attacked the bridge with a flamethrower because of a failed operation previously in the day. So that's why I feel like it would be good to take these. Cool. So that leaves us with 4 points. So if I'm returning back to the command cards, I can see that there is a command card for John Frost. Unfortunately, because this is going to be a scenario game, this command card isn't going to be of any use to me. This command card would come in very handy if you were building a legit force, a 100-point force, or a force to take at a tournament. But because I'm doing a scenario, this, I said, won't be applicable. But if you did want to take this command card, it's 3 points, and at the start of the game, after the enemy is deployed, you may redeploy one of your units. So that's really, really awesome anywhere in your deployment area. So if you've put down your 6-pounders and you see that your enemy is trying to counter where you've put those, you can then redeploy those 6-pounders. So again, comes in very handy, but we can't use it, unfortunately. The other card that I really want to use is Gammon Bombs. So let's click that one. So Gammon Bombs are only available for Frost's Parachute Platoon, Glider Pilot Platoon, or Parachute Royal Engineer Troop. So what does it do? You have to discard the card once you've assigned it to an infantry team within 1 turn of it assaulting a particular unit. So if you're assaulting a vehicle, you get an anti-tank of 3 and a firepower auto against top armor. So that's fantastic. So if you're going to attack a tank, you want to be using this command card, but it's only limited to 1 platoon in 1 turn in 1 assault per card, but you can get multiple of this card. So because we've got 2 points to spare, I'm going to take 2 cards of these in the hopes that hopefully my one of my parachute platoons will be able to assault an enemy vehicle and hopefully take it out if it gets to that. So let's take one final look at what we'll be dealing with. So we've got Frost Parachute Company with everything else that's in there. Plus we've got the command cards, which equals 50 points. It's going to be a fun little scenario. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Lots of smaller anti-tank weapons there and a couple of 6-pounders. It's going to make the scenario very interesting. So that concludes today's video. If you're interested in how I painted the models that have just popped up on the screen, I'll leave a link in the description and add a little card here. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think I should have added or missed out? And would you tweak my list in any way? Bearing in mind the sort of objective behind it is to stop that Kampfgruppe Grabner from making it across the bridge in his light reconnaissance vehicles and medium and light trucks. Really putting a big dent in the Germans' pushback to get Arnhem Bridge. But yeah, if you're new here and you like this video, please like and subscribe. And the next video we will be talking about the German list and what I'll be taking to get across the bridge. But thanks guys, and I will catch you at the next one.